Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unslaved. Happy to be back with you. Today, we are continuing this look into Masonry, getting into the origins. And I'm very excited to dive into this one. Excited to see what Michael has for us today. This one's called Princes of Light and the Origins of Masonry. And we got a new article to go along with it. So, Michael, let's take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Did another article. I've done several on it in article form, but we've really only done one serious podcast on this remarkable subject, and that was Jews and Templars. We must make a note to put that below. This will be like a good follow-on because there's so much disinformation about the origins of Masonry that even though people who maybe have listened to Jews and Templars or have browsed the articles on female Illuminati, all the articles we'll be talking about are on femaleilluminati.com. So, and then they might think, wow, there's just so many threads. It's quite convoluted. You're all over the place. Yeah, well, so is the disinformation all over the place. And it's been there for generations. We're fighting a great deal of disinformation. A lot of it has been put there totally deliberately by Gentile authors, by card-carrying anti-Semitic authors who want to leave a lot of false trails. And then there's well-meaning authors. Some of them are my top mentors. I mean, who also have in a way foolishly followed that thread because it does have a lot of credence in some aspects. Think of the Bolshevik Revolution, right? And they follow that, and kudos to them for taking us that far. But it's a deeper dive that we want to do. I mean, Ralph Ellis has already shown that you have to do that deeper dive if you ever want to get into, say, the history of Judaism. You're back into Egypt, as Josephus Flavius and other ancient historians hinted. So it's not just going to be starting, where a lot of these authors start. I mean, it's not that there's no Jewish conspiracy, but it's that one has to get the details right if you're properly going to investigate this. Otherwise, things go wrong very quickly, and innocent people are being accused of something, huge. And also, then the ones who've laid the false trail, they're obviously concealed. This is all about concealment. This is all about somebody in the long grass sacrificing other people. Which of course anyone listening to us must know that is indeed the pattern of history, and Jews have fallen foul of it, just like many other people have fallen foul. And another one we must link up to is the program on Khazars, which goes into great detail. It's a premium length, but we did it as a podcast. Members have got to check that out. We'll link it below. There's another red herring dead end, but with elements of truth. It is true that Gentile races, Turkic races, Tartar races, Russian, Swedish, whoever can convert to Judaism. That's been done for centuries where people convert. But that doesn't mean there's any bona fide racial ties, but that could be used by some very clever people to lead you astray from the actual truth. Then you've got your British Israelites. We haven't done anything like justice to them. I've got programs on the British Israelite deception. I go into it in the volume 1 of the Irish Origins, but we haven't done, there's so much more to get into with that. They have fallen for a bunch of red herrings. And again, Ralph Ellis's work would be, essential there because it clears up the whole story of how Jews got to Britain, how the story of Jesus getting to Britain, did those feet in ancient times, walk on England's pastures green, as Blake put it. Well, he was in jail, but his feet did actually walk on England's green and pleasant land. Yes, that's quite right. Incarcerated as the lunatic was. So, you've got that angle. And then the Mary Magdalene story. Yes, it's tangled. Yes, there's many players and actors in this whole story. We'll be talking about the Gaonim in a minute, but don't get overwhelmed by it, because you've got to realize that we are making our way through bomb damage. And a lot of it has been set off on purpose, right? A lot of fires have been started in order to get us to run here and run there. And then, because this was called, subtitled The Origins of Masonry, we do know that there's a lot of Jewish symbolism in Masonry. You're just going to have people arguing, and they're quite right on one level. Hey, and even you, Michael, you say the G, that's, the Gaonim, they're sure they were Jewish. So that ends it. Yeah, I'll go, yeah, but it's the 5-pointed star that you keep seeing on the great checkerboards. In fact, even the checkerboard, is that Jewish? Surely I would have thought that was Knights Templar, since that's the color of their flag, black and white. The picture I chose, for the banner of this program is George Washington wearing an apron. It is one of the most ubiquitous symbols in Masonry. But isn't that Knights Templar? Because they were builders, and they were the castrati. And the apron, we pointed out in female Illuminati pro, it's actually female, but leaving that aside, is to cover the genitalia, but also it was made of wool. And it is a parody, a copy, a simulacra of the woolen undergarments worn by Knights Templar after they had castrated themselves. They were obliged to wear and never remove. There's an elaborate ritual of how they wore these undergarments made of wool. And so the woolen apron covering the genitalia was the sign of, we are the castrati. And even holding the trowel. See, in Masonry, things have multiple meanings. The trowel works as a euphemism for a blade, that did the deed, as well as being a bricklayer's tool. They're laughing at you. They got 101, and sometimes right on the apron is the symbol right in the middle of the compass and protractor, which actually is a euphemism for the castrating tool. From a distance, the castrating tool looks like a compass and protractor, and it's right over the genitalia of the apron. So the apron is more Templarish symbolism than it is Masonic, although it also goes back to the Phoenicians. But many of the Phoenician builders were castrati. They were goddess worshippers. They used to have the boats. The Phoenicians were the great mariners, and on the front of their boats, the boat was she, and they'd have the horse's head, or they'd have the goddess symbol. So most of them were Masonic, just like the cult of Mithras. It's not just Masons and Templars who were castrati. This was an incredibly common motif. And so when you decode the symbolism of Masonry, you have all of this castration. It's in Article 1. But that doesn't mean that there's no Jewish symbolism. There is. But the deeper dive, Knights Kadosh and all of this, right? They sound like Jewish terms, right? Knight of Solomon's Temple, that sounds Jewish. People would just swear. But the thing is, if you could show that it's not Jewish, it's Setian, or it's Atenist, that there's already, because what you'd be really showing there is that those that you imagine are Jews aren't Jews at all. You made your point. Well, that's what we've done. That's what Ralph Ellis has done. That no word in the language is more inappropriately used than Jew. And it does represent sacerdotal things. It was used in the Eleusinian mysteries to represent a degree, a grade. In the Eleusinian mysteries, Jew represented like the third degree or something, the third stage. Then you've got the Jewess in Masonry. 3 brothers, sometimes portrayed as blackguards or thugs, who assaulted Hiram Abiff and killed him. Reason unknown. Or some other traditions say, no, it was Seconary, the pharaoh, who the bloody deed was done to. He's walking in the corridors, and 3 ruffians, as they call it in Masonry, attacked him and killed him. And we'll come back to this, because when we get to this incredible image of the Masonic coffin, which you also see on the banner that I've chosen, you'll see a coffin there in front of George Washington, and you'll see it on all sorts of, I first saw it in the 12th of July parades in Ireland. And it stuck with me, along with the ladder and all that. But the 5-pointed star isn't Jewish. That is an occult symbol that far predates Judaism. So what's it doing there in Masonry? So we've got the person who just gets off at the station and says, oh, it's all that Jewish symbolism. They're already got a problem. And if you stay there and continue researching just on that level alone, well, I mean, those pillars that are central to Masonic tracing boards, right? The 2 columns of Jachin and Boaz, those are Egyptian. So there's a lot of Phoenician symbolism. There's even Celtic symbolism, if you just but know where to look for it. So the thing is labyrinthine. And therefore the answer, as simple as you try to make it. Now, okay, so we've handled the symbolism in Masonry. It is definitely, I'm not going to accept, for many, many years now, I have not been willing to accept that you just say it's Jewish and we're done. But then you have the people who scream about the Bolshevik Revolution being top heavy with Jews. That's right. Apparently that's the case. We had the Khazar fiasco. We've got the Ottoman Empire. One of our first interviews was with Diana Springola, maybe episode 6 or something like that. Oh, and let's make sure to link that up. Churchill and the Ottoman Empire. And so much more needs to be done on that. But in that program, we brought up the fact that the leaders, up to 5 of the leaders, the Porte as they're called, the Port of the Young Turks, who seized and had control of the whole of the Turkish Empire, which was in the allied to First World War Germany. That's how powerful that was. But it was at one time a great empire of its own. They're all crypto Jews that ran it. Go back and listen to that podcast. Then you've got anecdotes like the Scottish Rite in America has been noticed by many, many people, even as high up as, say, Carol Quigley and people of that level. Scottish Rite is almost entirely a Jewish organization, they tell us. Then you've got even more plausibly the fact that a top Rothschild, Nathaniel, I think his name was Nathaniel Rothschild, was funder and a key member of the Cecil Rhodes's Round Table. One of the top heavy honchos of the Rothschild dynasty is right there in the top levels of that, as it later became known as Milner's Kindergarten, which is just the steering committee of the CFR and the Skull and Bones and almost every org worth its salt that cropped up in later America, including the Council of Foreign Relations, like I said, the Trilateral Commission. They're all run by Cecil Rhodes's Round Table group, who went on to be, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House, and super Jews of that nature are also on the Privy Council. And I can think of other examples, say the Martinists, secret order, full of Jews, etc., etc., etc. So it's going to be very difficult for anyone to counter the anti-Semitic claim that Jews, are not running the world conspiracy. And if you tried to do as I do, to say that's not strictly true, there's more to it than that, your work is cut out for you. So just again, an introduction. If people find this information a little bit hard to handle or overwhelming, you've got to realize that we are fighting a paradigm, a narrative that is centuries old and is itself labyrinthine. So you have to do the homework. There's no way, to make it simple. And so the article, although not long, the new one is short. I just wanted to tease out again and consolidate some of the facts, maybe add a couple of new things, because what we're trying to do slowly over time is actually, is get to the heart of the matter, which very few scholars actually get to, which is the history of Judaism itself. Because as Ralph Ellis has shown, the House of Edessa, for example, which was pagan, which was Parthian, and they would have more to do with Persian mysticism, say, in their heyday. And of course, he rightly points out that they're also Atenists. And if they're Atenists, then they must be Setian. But wait a minute. When they leave Parthia and move into the Middle East and settle in Edessa and Syria and Palestine, they marry in with Jews. Well, wait a minute. I thought the way the Bible portrays, say, let's take the Essenes, for example, or the Nazarenes. These are two groups, but and Ebionites. All these three groups and many others had vows of poverty.